Obama's CIA spied on the Trump campaign. We kind of knew that, but it all started well before that whole George Papadopoulos thing you've been told about. It was Obama. It was John Brennan. It was the CIA that started the entire Russian collusion hoax. We got the details for you. Also, Mayorkas is impeached. Democrats are blaming one of their own because she had COVID and missed the vote. And it's hilarious. And we'll share that with you. Also, there's a commie in California who's running for Senate who wants the minimum wage to be $50. I mean, what could go wrong there? That and a whole lot more. I'm Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry. Thanks for watching us right now live, noon Eastern, every single day, Monday through Thursday on Rumble. We appreciate you watching and following and subscribing and building that audience up. And if you're watching us after the fact on any one of the video platforms that serves this show, thank you so much for watching. And make sure you do subscribe either at Rumble or YouTube or wherever you'd like. Oh, and one other thing. We're now making available the audio of this for podcast formats. So wherever you like your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else, go ahead and subscribe there and leave a review if you like us. If you don't like us, why are you here? Let's get right to it. An unbelievable blockbuster story coming from Michael Schellenberger. You'll remember him. He, along with Matt Taibbi, won Investigative Journalist Awards for their work on the Twitter files. And now, frankly, this is even bigger. You know, the Russian collusion story that paralyzed the Trump presidency was a hoax. We know that after the tens of millions of dollars that was spent on the Robert Mueller investigation that led to nothing having to do with Russian collusion. You know that that story was nothing. It was made up. It was a creation of the Hillary Clinton campaign, right? They paid for the Steele dossier that had all those lies in it that ended up triggering an FBI counterintelligence investigation into the Trump campaign and eventually the Trump administration. It led to illegal FISA warrants where members of the FBI and Justice Department lied to the court to obtain those special warrants that allowed the FBI to spy on U.S. citizens under the guise of national security threats. You know all of that already. But what we've now learned, what we've now had confirmed, is this all started in the office of Barack Obama and his CIA director, John Brennan. Let's not forget something here. All of this story happened when Barack Obama was president and Joe Biden was vice president. So we're going to begin by asking a very simple question. What did Barack Obama know? And when did he know it? What did Joe Biden know? And when did he know it? Michael Schellenberger has now revealed that there are multiple sources close to the House Intelligence Committee that have revealed that the CIA asked Australia, England, New Zealand, and Canada, 4 of the 5 members of the Five Eyes, the U.S., we're the 5th member. The CIA asked those countries to spy on 26 American citizens who were connected to the Trump campaign. You see, it would be illegal for the CIA to spy on members of the Trump campaign. So they asked these countries to do their dirty work. And then they specifically asked them to interact with these people and find out what dirt they could, report back to the CIA. That information then found its way into the Steele dossier in the hands of the FBI, and that started the entire Crossfire Hurricane investigation. All of these roads lead back to President Barack Obama. Here's how Jesse Waters framed the story last night and his interview with Michael Schellenberger.
Brand new details about how Obama's CIA targeted Trump and started the entire Russia hoax. For years, we were told that tips from an Australian diplomat tipped off the FBI after a random conversation with Papadopoulos, a no-name 20-something. But according to new reporting by Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi, the whole thing was a CIA setup. Former CIA Director John Brennan identified 26 Trump associates to be targeted by the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, and then those interactions were the targets and were targeted by the FBI as suspicious. And that's how the FBI launched the Russia collusion hoax. The details of this entire operation have been stored in a top secret binder in a secret room in Washington. Trump ordered the whole thing declassified, And now the rumor is that the binder might be missing. Joining me now, one of the reporters who broke the story, Michael Schellenberger. Michael, explain how this all started with the CIA picking these 26 Trump people.
Yeah, good to be with you, Jesse. Well, obviously, this is an extremely serious story and serious allegation by multiple credible sources that Public and Racket, that's Matt Taibbi's publication, have spoken to. These are people that are close to the House intelligence investigation of how the Russia collusion hoax began. The story, as you mentioned, was that, oh, we were just informed by foreign intelligence about this. Our sources tell us a very different story, which is that this was initiated by the U.S. government. It came from within the U.S. government's intelligence community, including the CIA, that they asked the so-called Five Eyes nations intelligence agencies, that's the other English-speaking nations, including Britain and Australia, to spy on 26 Trump associates, or at least they had a list of the 26 associates that were identified. This is new information. Some people have theorized about this and speculated about it. We feel very confident that our sources were in a position to know and are very credible in this report. And it's obviously a very serious allegation because this is illegal spying and it's illegal election interference.
Okay, so you're reporting that the CIA got these allies to bump these 26 Trump associates, create interactions, and then call these interactions suspicious and let the FBI know they were suspicious. And that starts the whole thing. What about this binder that encapsulates this whole thing and no one knows where it is right now, or Trump has it? What's that?
Well, Jesse, we'll have a piece tomorrow that is specifically about the binder, but as a friend of the show and of yours on this, I'll say that there has been widespread speculation that this binder was the reason or a reason for the FBI raid of Mar-a-Lago, and we'll be discussing that tomorrow. But obviously, if this binder contains what we have been told that it contains, which may include raw intelligence, information showing that the U.S. government, the CIA and the intelligence community of the U.S. government, initiated the Russia collusion hoax, that it did not occur in the way that the official story, including the Durham investigation, had portrayed it, then that's extremely serious information. And it may be, if the FBI then went to go get it in order to continue the cover-up of this information, that obviously adds an even more dramatic wrinkle to this. Again, we'll have more to say about it tomorrow, but this is a huge, huge story. I mean, I've been thinking about it in the history of the United States of America. Have we ever had something like this where the intelligence community was weaponized against a political candidate and using our foreign allies to do it? I can't think of a more important or dramatic story.
When we went to air, we checked Mr. Schellenberger's account on X, and he had not yet revealed anything about that binder. We're keeping an eye on it. But understand it, and by the way, with all due respect, Mr. Schellenberger, the real difference here is that they asked our allies, our foreign allies, to assist them in this surveillance. But I think it's been pretty proven now that our intelligence agencies have, in fact, spied on American political candidates. The difference here is that Barack Obama's CIA asked our allies to do it for them and then initiate this whole thing. You'll remember that the Crossfire Hurricane investigation, the counterintelligence investigation into the Trump campaign, began, we were told, because George Papadopoulos, who was an unpaid advisor listed on the Trump campaign website for certain foreign policy issues in the Middle East, we were told that an Australian diplomat reported to the CIA that this guy, George Papadopoulos, was in a bar in London bragging about how the Trump campaign had acquired Hillary Clinton's emails from Russia. You remember that? And so the FBI, James Comey, and everybody, Peter Strzok, like, well, we had no choice. I mean, we get that kind of information from our ally, from the Australians, then we have to take it seriously. So we had to initiate investigation. We were just doing our job. We were just trying to protect our country. We were trying to help Trump, they used to say. If he really had a mole in his campaign, he should have wanted to know about it. Of course, forget the fact that they never actually informed Donald Trump that they were spying on his campaign. If they were really trying to help him, you'd think they would have let him know, right? Giving him a heads up. Hey, you might want to watch out. But they never did, because that was all a lie. That was all a lie. Take a look at this graphic. This is part of Michael Schellenberger's report. The person on the left is Ambassador Joseph Mifsud. That guy is the Australian diplomat. The guy in the middle is George Papadopoulos. And the guy on the right, you remember this guy? Stephen Halper. He's the guy who actually reached out to George Papadopoulos in London, initiated a friendship with him. He got him to the bar that night. Stephen Halper, that guy was an FBI asset. The FBI paid him to do that. Here's something else that's new and breaking that we just learned. That guy in the middle, George Papadopoulos, the center of this entire story, he'll be a special guest on this program tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. He'll be telling his story and his reaction to all of these new revelations. Can I just remind you the question that we started with and what we need to keep asking? This is not old news. This is not, oh, who cares? It's back in 2016. Let's move on. This is not, something that isn't relevant to today. And by the way, this isn't even about James Comey or even Hillary Clinton. This is all about Barack Obama. This all happened under Barack Obama's watch. Frankly, it all happened at Barack Obama's direction. He, his CIA director, John Brennan, his director of national intelligence, James Clapper, they were all in the middle of this. And there's one other figure that knew everything about this and was part and parcel to it. That would be the vice president under Barack Obama. That would be Joe Biden. We also know him as the big guy. And Joe Biden and the big guy were back in the news again yesterday because Tony Bobulinski, Hunter Biden's former business partner, testified to the House Oversight Committee. Now, the transcript was released. We don't actually have the video of it. But luckily, we actually have some video of Tony Bobulinski from 3 years ago, before the 2020 presidential election, when he came public with all of this stuff, when he granted an interview to Tucker Carlson and told everything about how Joe Biden, his brother Jim, and his son Hunter were part of an international fraudulent business scheme to sell access illegally to the vice president of the United States. Of course, it didn't get much coverage because the media blacklisted the entire story. They pretended as though this was Russian disinformation. And why did they do that? Well, because the very same people that lied to you in 2016 about Russian collusion were also lying to you in 2020 about the Hunter Biden laptop story, claiming that it was Russian disinformation. We know that's not true now either. That was a hoax as well. Everything in the Hunter Biden laptop story is legitimate, including all of those emails that had this man's name on it, Tony Bobulinski. Here he was telling his story.
Involved in various successful businesses, both in this country and abroad. I'm making this statement to set the record straight about the involvement of the Biden family, Vice President Biden, his brother Jim Biden, and his son Hunter Biden in dealings with the Chinese. I've heard Joe Biden say that he's never discussed business with Hunter. That is false. I have firsthand knowledge about this because I directly dealt with the Biden family, including Joe Biden. I have also heard that Vice President Biden said on Tuesday that Senator Ron Johnson, the chair of the Senate Homeland Security Committee, should be ashamed for suggesting that Biden family sought to profit from their name. Well, here are the facts I know, and everything I'm saying is corroborated by emails, WhatsApp chats, agreements, documents, and other evidence. And the American people can judge for themselves. I brought, I guess, for record, 3 phones that spanned the years 2015 through 2018. These phones have never been held by anybody else besides myself. I was told this past Sunday by somebody who was also involved in this matter that if I went public this information, it would bury all of us, man. The Bidens included. I have no wish to bury anyone. I've never been political. The few contributions I have made have been to Democrats. But what I am is a patriot and a veteran.
That's right, a veteran of the United States Navy, and he seems pretty believable and pretty compelling, but only a handful of people who watch Fox News or alternate media outlets and the new media, digital media, like right here at Town Hall. You all saw this. You all knew this. And now, finally, Tony Bobulinski yesterday testified to the House Oversight Committee, and now they knew about it as well. A lot of that testimony we're told, based on the transcripts we saw, had to do with James Biden, the brother of the president of the United States. I want to show you one part of the Tucker Carlson interview that focused on James Biden because it's critically important. This is the scheme that they put together. This whole idea that they could sell access to the vice president, make millions, tens of millions of dollars from hostile nations like Russia, China, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, etc., corrupt governments that all wanted access to the vice president and business with the vice president. They put together the entire scheme, and they were sure they weren't going to get caught. Why? Well, take a listen to this.
And I should say, and I want to put the document on the screen, in his pitch to the Chinese, in his bio, Jim Biden describes himself as an advisor, a current advisor to his brother. So was it clear to you from the beginning that what Jim Biden was bringing to this deal was his relationship with Joe Biden?
Yeah, 1,000%, crystal clear. After I met with Joe Biden the morning of May 3rd at the Milken conference, and then was taken backstage after Joe had spoken, you know, we joked around for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then I walked him out to his car. I think he was, I think they referenced he was off to see the lieutenant governor.
This is Joe Biden.
Joe Biden, yes.
Yeah.
And then after that, I went over to the Peninsula Hotel and I sat with Jim Biden for 2 hours, where Jim Biden walked through his history and his own words, stating all the work and effort he did to get Joe Biden elected initially in Delaware, and then through the family history and the role that he had played in it. And in that meeting, remember, I'm the son of a naval officer. I'm a naval officer, was a naval officer myself. And because I held a Q clearance, which is the equivalent of a top secret clearance, we're audited every year. So if you receive a gift, I think the barrier was $25. Anything larger than $25, we had to disclose it to the government, because obviously anybody with a clearance, the government is watching closely that they're not influenced by the Russians, the Iranians, the Chinese, and stuff like that. So as I was listening to Jim walk through this, I have a big heart. If you talk to anybody who knows me, they would weigh in on that. I'm a kind person, and I'm thinking about the Biden family. Like, how are they doing this? I know Joe decided not to run in 2016, but what if he ran in the future? Aren't they taking political risk or headline risk? And I remember looking at Jim Biden and saying, how are you guys getting away with this? Like, aren't you concerned? And he looked at me and he laughed a little bit and said, plausible deniability.
He said that out loud?
Yes, he said it directly to me, one-on-one in a cabana at the Peninsula Hotel after about a hour and a half, 2-hour meeting, with me asking out of concern, how are you guys doing this? Aren't you concerned that you're going to put your brother's future presidential campaign at risk? The Chinese, the stuff that you guys have been doing already in 2015 and 2016 around the world. And I just can almost picture his face where he sort of chuckles and says, plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability. Just deny it. Just deny it. I mean, put the pieces together here. We've seen President Joe Biden confronted about these things over and over and over again throughout his political career, especially in the last 3, 4, 5 years. And what does he do? Every single time someone confronts him on the facts, confronts him. Hey, Tony Bobulinski just said this. Hey, the emails say that. Hey, the text messages say that. Hey, the laptop has this in it. Hey, there's evidence of cash checks coming from foreign governments. What about this? What about this? And what does Joe Biden do every single time? Every single time.
Mr. Vice President, how many times have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings.
And so how do you know?
Here's what I know. I know Trump deserves to be investigated.
There you go. Yeah. Deniability. Just deny it, deny it, deny it. Never happened, never done it, never talked to him, never exchanged anything, never knew anything about his business. But the problem is Trump, with the finger pointing and the yelling and the rage. And just keep denying it. Deny it, deny it, deny it, deny it until you can't deny it anymore. Until the media gets bored with it. Until reporters think that it's yesterday's news. Until it just looks like Republicans are acting politically instead of actually serving the American people. And just keep denying it. That's all you can do. And it certainly fits what Tony Bobulinski just said he heard. It certainly fits with their behavior, doesn't it? What we're learning about the testimony under oath behind closed doors, Miranda Devine of the New York Post is reporting on it. She's the author of that article that was lied about by the intelligence community, saying that it was Russian disinformation. She's a New York Post reporter. Tony Bobulinski, from my direct personal experience, it's clear to me that Joe Biden was the brand being sold by the Biden family. His family's foreign influence peddling operation from China to Ukraine and elsewhere sold out to foreign actors who were seeking to gain influence and access to Joe Biden and the United States government. Joe Biden was more than a participant in and beneficiary of his family's business. He was an enabler, despite being buffered by a complex scheme to maintain plausible deniability. You know what's amazing about this story is that there's only one person throughout it all who has stayed consistent with his story without changing it, without having to correct it, without getting caught in a lie and then having to say, oh, well, without changing it. First Joe Biden said, I never had anything to do. I never knew anything about my son's business. And then remember, they changed that. And suddenly it was, I was never in business with my son, or I never benefited from the business of my son, because he could no longer deny that he didn't know anything about it, because we have the text messages, we have the pictures, we have the records. See, he keeps changing his story. One person who hasn't changed his story is Tony Bobulinski. And let's watch the video of George Stephanopoulos interviewing Tony Bobulinski. And we can't do that because George wasn't interested in this story. How about the folks at Meet the Press? Can we watch the video of their interview with Tony Bobulinski? We don't have that either. Jake Tapper? No. Isn't it weird that in 3 years, the central figure in this entire thing, a man who just testified and gave all the details, a man whose name is on almost all the emails from Hunter Biden's laptop, Tony Bobulinski, that man is available, but there's only one journalist in the entire nation, the entire world, that cared to interview him, Tucker Carlson, who then eventually lost his job. It's all pretty weird, isn't it? Isn't it? By the way, let's tie all this together, shall we? In 2016, your United States intelligence community, the CIA, the FBI, they investigated a man running for president. They asked foreign countries to spy on 26 individuals working on that man's campaign, Donald Trump. And then they lied about it. They've been lying about it. They continue to lie about it. And that all happened when Barack Obama was president. And then 4 years later, when there was hard evidence that the man who was running for president, Joe Biden, just 2 weeks before the election, this evidence becomes public to everybody. And the central figure speaks out and gives an interview. And all of this evidence that showed that Joe Biden was involved in a crooked business scheme with his brother and his son, illegally selling access to the White House. And that same intelligence community came out with a letter, 51 professionals, saying that the entire thing was Russian disinformation. Not only is Donald Trump lying about this, but he's doing the bidding of Vladimir Putin. They lied in 2016, and they meddled with the election, and they didn't succeed. American people were smart enough to see through it eventually, and Donald Trump won the presidency. Then they tried to shut down his presidency with a special prosecutor and fake news stories left and right. The most tawdry, horrific, outlandish things that you would ever imagine made their way onto the front page of august newspapers and onto cable news and broadcast news nearly 24/7. They tried to paralyze that administration, and it still ended up giving us a great economy with record low unemployment and peace throughout the world. And then that exact same intelligence community meddled in the election in 2020. They propped up Joe Biden. They killed the story that would have killed his candidacy by saying it was Russian disinformation, lying and saying that Donald Trump was associated with Vladimir Putin and lying to the American people. And they got away with it. And to button the whole thing up, all of the proof, all of the documents that showed what happened during Russian collusion apparently was in Donald Trump's possession in Mar-a-Lago. And the next thing you know, you've got an early morning pre-dawn raid with FBI agents, guns drawn, breaking into a former president's home and confiscating those documents. Did you ever wonder why Trump was the one who had to deal with an FBI raid for the documents when Joe Biden was able to voluntarily hand over all of his classified documents? Kind of makes sense now, doesn't it? It sure as hell does. This is a crooked, corrupt administration, and so many of them deserve to be impeached, especially the big guy, Joe Biden. But we're going to have to settle right now for Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. He's the Secretary of Homeland Security. And last night, finally, the House of Representatives did, in fact, impeach him.
On this vote, the yeas are 214 and the nays are 213. The resolution is adopted.
And it was a close vote for sure. But yes, Alejandro Mayorkas will now face impeachment. Why was he impeached? Was it just political, as you're going to be hearing from cable news and Democrats and certainly Karine Jean-Pierre later today at the White House? Well, of course it wasn't. No, Alejandro Mayorkas deserved to be impeached, as Speaker Johnson said in his statement. For nearly a year, the House Homeland Security Committee has taken a careful and methodical approach to this investigation, and the results are clear. From his first day in office, Secretary Mayorkas has willfully and consistently refused to comply with federal immigration laws, fueling the worst border catastrophe in American history. He's undermined public trust through multiple false statements to Congress, obstructed lawful oversight of the Department of Homeland Security, and violated his oath of office. Representative Dan Bishop said it on the floor better than anyone can.
Madam Speaker, many have said what the issue is. Many have mischaracterized it, in my judgment. The issue presented by the articles of impeachment and why they should be adopted by the House is not a matter of policy. It is not a matter of maladministration. It is not a matter of incompetence. It is not a matter of neglect. It is not even a matter of refusal to enforce the law. It was stated succinctly and aptly in the district court opinion that ultimately led to the United States Supreme Court last summer in Texas, in the United States versus Texas. The core of the dispute is whether the executive branch may require its officials to act in a manner that conflicts with a statutory mandate imposed by Congress. It may not. You see, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, issued guidelines, administrative law, instructing the Department of Homeland Security not to detain criminal aliens, nor those ordered finally removed. That is what he did, and that was flatly contradictory to statutes passed by the Congress in the mid-1990s. We are a nation of laws. The court has said, the Supreme Court has said, it cannot referee this dispute. It is up to Congress. And the Congress has but one means in this situation to vindicate the law. It cannot help the situation by shutting down the government, by cutting off funding. There is no new cabinet secretary to refuse to confirm in the Senate. There is but one means: the impeachment of the secretary who purported to issue law defying the Congress. That must result in his impeachment. If the law is to have any force, if the Congress is to remain of any significance in the jurisprudence, in the law of the United States.
15 more.
Really well said and beautifully articulated by Representative Bishop. He's a statesman. He gets it, and he's protecting Congress and the Constitution with this move. By the way, I want to point out, over Congressman Bishop's right shoulder there, you'll see that woman in red. I'm sure you recognize her. That's Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, MTG. You know, the cool kids in this town don't really like her. They make fun of her. Cool kids in the media do too. Even some cool kids in the Republican club up there on Capitol Hill. You know, she's not their type of congresswoman. She's not their type of Republican. Let me tell you something. Say what you will about her. You cannot deny the fact that she has been a warrior on this issue. She has made sure that the House of Representatives followed through on this pledge to bring impeachment charges up against Alejandro Mayorkas. She has championed this cause, and she has been a lioness making sure that this happened. She deserves huge congratulations for getting this thing done. Beautifully done. And she deserves that. Well done, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Tim Burchett. Yeah, sure. Let's go with it. He said kind of the same thing that you just heard from Congressman Bishop, but he made it a little more succinct and a little bit more plain language instead of Congress language. I thought you'd like it.
Hey, everybody. Tim Burchett leaving the House floor tonight. A few votes. The main one, of course, was impeaching Secretary Mayorkas, and we, in fact, had the votes tonight, and he was impeached, and he should have been. He lied under oath. He said our border is safe, and in fact, it is not safe. It is a very dangerous place, and there is little or any security there. People are coming over, as you know, and this president and this White House and have done very little to do it. We already had H.R. 2 passed last year, and it was, I'll get you 1 second, I'm sorry. And it's waiting over there on Schumer's desk and refused to do anything about it. So it was a good vote. He needed to be impeached. You've got to get away from this. Everybody gets a trophy and there's nobody held accountable. So thank y'all for sitting here.
You broke the law and you need to be impeached. I mean, you can't say it any better. By the way, Alejandro Mayorkas is only the second cabinet secretary in American history to face impeachment now. So, well, there you go. The Biden administration making history once again. The last time this happened was 1876. Secretary of War William Belknap. I'm sure you know all about the Trader Post scandal, don't you? No? All right, real fast. It was during the Grant administration, Ulysses S. Grant. Yeah, that one, U.S. Grant. And he was the Secretary of War. By the way, we should go back to Secretary of War, shouldn't we? Secretary of Defense. That's why should we be on the defensive? Defense? No, I want a Secretary of War, damn it. Don't be messing with us. Anyway, Secretary of War, William Belknap. And in the Oklahoma territories, we had Fort Sill. It's still there. It's a big Army fort there. In fact, I know people stationed there. Fort Sill, it's awesome. I've been there a couple of times. Anyway, we're building out Fort Sill there in the Oklahoma territories, and apparently Secretary of War Belknap was getting kickbacks from vendors. Oh, yeah, it's a tale as old as time, my friends. Getting kickbacks from vendors, building out Fort Sill and the surrounding areas there. You want to do business with the Army? You want to do business with the U.S. military, with the fort here, and you want to open up a store? Sure, you give us a little something, something. And guess who was the star witness against Secretary of War Belknap in the House impeachment inquiry? You will never guess. General George Custer. Yes, that General Custer. Boy, they got him in the end, didn't they? Anyway, General Custer testifies against Belknap. Finally, the House impeaches him, but the morning of the impeachment vote, President Grant accepted Belknap's resignation. And so now a huge debate erupts on the floor. Can we impeach somebody who's a private citizen? Can we impeach a person who isn't actually a secretary in the cabinet? They went ahead and impeached him anyway. They had the trial in the Senate. He was acquitted, but mostly because he had already resigned. And most of the senators were like, well, we can't really impeach somebody who doesn't work for the administration, so this is kind of moot. The majority of senators, by the way, did vote to remove him, but he didn't get the requisite 2/3. And I lay this out for you because that's where this is headed now. Now Chuck Schumer needs to put together on the schedule an impeachment trial. There will be House managers named who will come in and they will act as prosecutors in the trial, and the Senate will be the jury. You've seen the impeachment of President Trump, those fake impeachments that we saw. Well, that'll be the same process here. And we'll see what happens. But you see, maybe Secretary Mayorkas should follow the dignified example of Secretary Belknap, his predecessor, his dubious predecessor. Maybe he can save us all a lot of trouble here, and he should just resign in disgrace. Then he can go back to California and, I don't know, run for governor or something. Oh, one other aspect of this story that needs to be shared, and that is the impeachment only happened because of the heroic, triumphant return of Majority Whip Congressman Steve Scalise of Louisiana. He wasn't there for the vote last week that went down by 1 vote. He wasn't there because he was undergoing cancer treatment. This guy has been through everything. Remember when that left-wing lunatic mass shooter, attempted murderer, shot up a bunch of Republicans on a baseball field just about 3 miles from where I'm sitting right now. Steve Scalise, of course, got shot in the hip, and he dodged to death as he was bleeding out from his damaged artery in his hip. And now he's facing off with cancer. But look at this moment when he returns to the House so he can vote for Mayorkas.
How are you feeling?
Feeling great. It's exciting to be back. I know it's been a long time, since 6 weeks, and I've missed being here. And you can only do so much by phone, and so to be back in person is really exciting.
Your whole conference missed you very much last week, especially your vote.
I've heard the votes are tight, and every vote's going to matter around here.
Are you going to seal the deal today on this Mayorkas impeachment?
Yeah, we're going to bring it up in a few hours, so it'll be the second vote tonight, and then we got a full slate the rest of this week.
Yeah, that's great, and it's great to see him back. By the way, I love the fact that he's wearing he's from Louisiana. He's wearing his Mardi Gras tie because it was Mardi Gras last night for the vote. Very cool stuff, and that's what you want to see. If you're a Republican, you get so excited about seeing a man battling back from so many things that Steve Scalise has battled back from, including cancer. And he like emerges from his hospital fighting cancer, gets to the floor, and votes to impeach Mayorkas. That's great. You got to be proud if you're a Republican. But you know what? I got to be honest. Battling cancer, I mean, yeah, I guess it's okay, but it's not nearly as serious as what Congresswoman Chu, a Democrat, had to endure there over on the other side of the aisle. Judy Chu, Congresswoman from California, she was unable to make it to the vote last night. She put out a statement explaining the serious medical threat she had, and honestly, it makes cancer look like a day in the park. Yeah, as you can see here from her statement, I recently tested positive for COVID-19. Thoughts and prayers, Congresswoman Chu. Thoughts and prayers. I am isolating in accordance with CDC guidelines. I was unable to be on the floor to vote once again against impeaching Secretary Mayorkas. So let's just get this straight. Scalise is facing down the big C, and he figures out a way to get himself out of the hospital and limp his way into the House so he can impeach Mayorkas. Chu, she doesn't even say she has any symptoms. She tested positive, so that's it. I got to stay home. I'm isolating in place. Fauci told me I had to. You know what? By the way, she put this statement out on X, and you got to see the meltdown, the absolute meltdown from the Democrats who are so pissed at her for doing this. Look at them. Where are you? Why were you here? Unless you're fighting for your life, you deserve to be voted out. Look, I like this one. Wear a mask. Well, everybody knows a mask doesn't do anything except Mark Goines, apparently. What? Our ancestors hate you for what you've become. What the hell? That's pretty harsh. You better be really sick. No, wait, we need to see more of these. Congresswoman, we are the fight for our lives to save the republic. We stand in line for hours to beat voter suppression. We write postcards, knock on doors, sign up for phone banks, dig deep to make our small dollar donations, and we do it even when we feel too sick to go on. I'm disgusted by Mark Slavin, Mark with a C, for saying such a thing. Would you have Congresswoman Chu be a grandma killer? Would you have her defy CDC guidelines? How dare you, sir? How dare you? Don't you understand the serious nature of this pandemic? Don't you understand that people's lives are at risk? Some things are a little more important than a vote on the House floor. We, for our sake, all of Town Hall Media, we applaud you, Congresswoman Chu. Thank you. Thank you for looking out for the interests of your colleagues and the staff members in the House of Representatives. And we wish you good health. Get better soon. Last night, there was a special election up in New York for the seat vacated by George Santos. Well, it wasn't really vacated by George Santos. Well, not voluntarily, at least. Let me just sum this up for you. Idiot Republicans are now seeing the ramifications of not standing by George Santos. Idiot Republicans in the House are now seeing the actual domino effect of their feckless actions, voting George Santos out of the House of Representatives, a man who even said he was just going to finish this term and he wasn't going to run for re-election. But they so wanted to make nice with CNN reporters and New York Times reporters that they said, yes, this George Santos is an insult to this institution and he must go. And so we're going to vote him out. And now these idiots are seeing exactly what happens when you bend over backwards and do whatever the left demands you to do. When you take a knee to them, this is what happens. Because a Democrat won that seat. There was a special election last night. And listen, I don't want to get into the weeds of it. The nominee for the Republicans, Trump is saying that she didn't embrace MAGA enough, and that's why she lost. The anti-Trump Republicans are saying she was too MAGA, and that's not. I did see one clip of her. This is a Long Island district, by the way, which usually tends to be a little bit more Republican, a little bit more conservative. Although George Santos just won and beat a Democrat, so it had been. This is one of those districts that's going back and forth, right? But I did see her refusing to address head-on the abortion issue. Okay, the Democrat kept pressing her. Are you going to legalize abortion? Are you going to make it illegal? And she didn't own it. She didn't own her position on it. I was watching it as a pro-life Republican. I was like, I have no idea where this woman stands after watching this. And that's a problem. You can't be a weasel. You can't not take a firm stand on issues like this. But there, by the way, I'm just saying that from my perspective. I didn't follow the race very much. I don't live there. I'm just telling you that why she lost is sort of, there's a lot of different opinions about it. I actually have my own opinion that has nothing to do with political opinions or conservative political positions. I'll tell you that in a second. But the bottom line is none of this needed to happen if Republicans knew how to stick together and not bend to the left. Representative Mike Collins put it beautifully last night when the results came in. Who still thinks Republicans helping Democrats kick out Santos was a good idea? Anyone? Anyone at all? Because now that very slim majority in the House for Speaker Johnson and the Republicans got that much slimmer. George Santos, by the way, took to X and he laid it all out for everybody. Take a look. I won New York 3 with 0 super PAC money, 0 CLF money, 0 establishment money. Tonight, the establishment set $10 million on fire. That's right. They spent $10 million trying to win this seat. I flipped a 23-year blue seat. Oh, forgive me. I thought that this is a district that went back and forth. Apparently, this was Democrat for 23 years, and Santos won it. Thank you. I stand corrected. With the help of grassroots activists and by activating the base with retail politics. Hey, Nassau, New York, GOP. Money does not buy votes. It's respecting the wishes of the base that wins votes. New York 3 is MAGA country, and since MAGA was disrespected, MAGA stayed home. One other tweet he put out to my former colleagues in the House GOP, please make these idiots pay you guys $10 million back. These rhinos are the most effective Democrat operatives in the nation. Listen, let me just say this. This is not about George Santos, in my opinion. This is about feckless Republicans not understanding how to play party politics, okay? Listen, did George Santos deserve to be expelled? No, I don't think so. I think expelling somebody is a pretty drastic thing. Now, would I have voted for George Santos? Well, I guess it depends on who he's running against, but George Santos bears some blame in what happened here, considering the fact that he seems to be a serial liar, a habitual liar, and a bit of a fabulist. But you know what? Just pause for a second here. This is not whataboutism. This is about truth and reality. You know, this is how you make moral decisions in life. You take a look at the big picture of issues and you determine exactly what the most important thing is, and then you follow your moral instincts to that most important thing. All right? So let's look at the Democrats for a minute. Ilhan Omar is on record saying that she puts her birth country of Somalia as her number one priority, her faith in Islam number 2, and she never even mentioned where America factors in the ranking. Ilhan Omar has been suspected of marrying her own brother, violating immigration laws, violating voter laws, violating fundraising and campaign finance laws. And do you see any Democrats moving to expel her from the House of Representatives? In fact, you see Democrats circling the wagons and willing to take a bullet for Ilhan Omar. Rashida Tlaib is openly supporting Hamas terrorists over in the Middle East. She is also accused of campaign finance irregularities. Cori Bush is currently under investigation by the Justice Department and an ethics panel in the House over campaign finance violations and has openly supported terrorists. Do you see any mainstream Democrats? Do you see any movement within the Democratic Party to oust her or to even distance themselves from her? Nancy Pelosi is clearly guilty of insider trading. There's plenty of evidence that she and her husband and her family have enriched themselves by buying and moving stocks directly related to legislation that only she could have known about before it was made public. But they treat her like a goddess. And they'll all take a bullet for each other when push comes to shove. They circle the wagons, they link arms, even though a lot of them hate each other. But when a vote is needed, when a seat needs to be protected, Democrats fall in line. That's what party politics are supposed to be, I'm told. It's funny, Republicans are constantly telling us that we need to fall in line, that we need to suck it up. If we have a candidate or a nominee that we don't approve of and we don't like that much, well, it doesn't matter because the worst Republican is still better than the best Democrat. So you got to vote the party. Just suck it up. It's not always going to be perfect. But do you notice they never do that? They never do that when the chips are down. They constantly acquiesce. They constantly bow to pressure. What a double standard that is. And now these idiotic, moronic Republicans who patted themselves on the back and got the virtue signal about how I will not share a space with the likes of George Santos. Well, okay, that space that you were sharing with him just got a lot smaller, and it just keeps shrinking. Is it noble and wonderful that Democrats circle the wagons and stand by people who are odious and horrific, like Hakeem Jeffries, a habitual election denier who's now their minority leader, or Jamal Bowman, who's guilty of violating law by disrupting a vote by pulling a fire alarm, and he got off with a slap on his wrist? Are they virtuous? Are they wonderful? That? No, I think they're odious and horrible. But they know how to play the game. And my guys, well, to paraphrase Will Rogers, I don't belong to an organized political party. I'm a Republican. Meanwhile, things are melting down over there in the Biden White House. Things are getting uglier and uglier and uglier. Take a look at this story from Axios, Jim Vandehei reporting that Biden advisor Susan Rice, you'll remember her. She worked in the Obama administration. In fact, she was part of the tightly knit circle there that helped the Russian collusion story move forward. She is now apparently referring to the Health and Human Services Secretary Becerra as a bitch ass. Bitch ass. Now, there's a phrase you don't hear very often. Certainly not in the White House, I don't think. Yeah, Becerra is a bitch ass and called him an idiot, according to multiple sources. During one meeting, when Biden was tearing into Becerra, Rice passed Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas a note that read, "Don't save him," according to two people familiar with the meeting. Now, this is fascinating, by the way, if you think about it, because we're told that the grown-ups are in charge now. We're told all the experts, the norms have been restored. And every time we turn a page now or click on a website or turn on CNN, we're hearing about all of this infighting in the Biden administration, that they're all screaming profanities at each other and they're all melting down behind the scenes, right? And by the way, part of this story also is a not too subtle way of trying to send the message that Joe Biden is a man in charge behind the scenes. Oh, you may see an amiable dunce and a fumbling idiot in front of the cameras who can't remember where he's supposed to stand or anybody's name, but behind the scenes, he's laying into his Secretary of Homeland Health and Human Services. Does anyone believe that, really? Anyway, the idea that Susan Rice is referring to him as a ass is a beautiful thing to behold, because there's a lot of profanity, apparently, over there in the Biden White House. In fact, if you look at the article, the whole thing is titled over at Axios, "How Biden Botched the Border." And it has all of these insights about the fighting. President lit into his team, including then Deputy Chief of Staff Jen O'Malley Dillon, Homeland Security Advisor Liz Sherwood Randall, and other immigration officials. He demanded obscure immigration data points and vented when his staff didn't have them handy. Again, I think part of this is spinning, trying to say, oh, no, Joe Biden is a man on top of this, and these people are failing him. Joe Biden's a virtuous, brilliant mastermind behind this greatest presidency in the history of mankind. But his staff and his secretaries and his cabinet, they're failing the man, and he gets so angry behind the scenes. Biden's fury subsided, it says, and aides scrambled for the information he wanted. People in the meeting later told others in frustration that his winding process and irritability were making it more difficult to reach decisions about the border. Also, it goes on to talk about how Susan Rice is always at odds with certain members of the cabinet, including the aforementioned ass statement. You see the scene that they're painting here, that behind the scenes in this White House, everyone's screaming profanities at each other. This has been like a week-long story here as they're trying to boost up the idea of behind the scenes, and all of the infighting that you're seeing from various cabinet people. For instance, let's remember this report about the immediate after effect of the special prosecutor's report last week, that in a court legal document said Joe Biden was unfit mentally to even defend himself in court. And, we're supposed to be okay with him with the nuclear codes. Remember the story that leaked immediately afterward?
Fury behind closed doors. We have new details this morning about President Biden's angry reaction in a private meeting after the special counsel's report exonerated him of legal wrongdoing, but then put in the report that he wouldn't be charged because he's an elderly man with memory issues. The special counsel wrote on Biden's diminished faculties and memory, and even went on to say that he didn't remember, even within several years, when his son Beau died. The president was livid about this, reportedly, and in a meeting with Democrats in Virginia, lashed out, saying, "How could I effing forget that?"
Why is he such a potty mouth? Listen, I have no doubt that he has anger management issues. I mean, we've seen it bubbling up. It's also, by the way, one of the symptoms of early onset Alzheimer's, actually advanced Alzheimer's, to tell you the truth. I know this personally. I've got a couple of different people in my life who have been through this, and they do get very angry, even violent sometimes. And we sort of see that with this guy. But do you see how they're trickling out all of these stories from angry, defiant Biden behind the scenes trying to get a handle on the border, angry, defiant, potty mouth Joe Biden screaming, "Why would I effing forget that?" And they're all trying to paint this picture that is very different than what we heard last week in that devastating report about the diminished mental capacity of Joe Biden. It's almost like this is planned. It's almost like it's coordinated. It's almost like it's propaganda. Well, our friends at Media Research Center have put together another brilliant propaganda montage. We shared one with you yesterday, and this one's frankly even better. You remember how the late, great Rush Limbaugh would discover these video clips or audio clips, I guess, on radio of people going on cable news and broadcast news, and they all start using the same phrase, right? Rush Limbaugh was brilliant at deciphering this and figuring it out and saying, oh, look, the talking points have come out, and now everybody's going to use the same phrase. And it's not just people from the administration on the payroll defending the Democrat in question. No, that also gets picked up by all the people in the media, because it's all one big happy family, like what Andrew Breitbart would call the Democrat media complex. They're all in on it together. And so this is the perfect example of showing how talking points go out in the morning, people in the administration, people on Capitol Hill, and then the media all read the talking points. And then when they go on camera, they all say the same thing. So I want you to listen for one word that clearly was the word that everyone was supposed to use about Robert Hur's special prosecutor report describing the president's mental incapacity. The word is gratuitous.
Listen, the word of the day in this report came out to describe the descriptions was gratuitous, and I think that was right. There were cheap shots.
I found some of the language in the report a little bit gratuitous.
I think that this special counsel report was gratuitous.
This gratuitous language that he used. Gratuitous language about his mental acuity.
A very gratuitous hypothetical about Biden's age.
I think the word gratuitous is generous. There was so much unnecessary, inflammatory, and partisan kind of language that was used about President Biden in there.
There's a Justice Department tradition that you don't interfere with presidential elections. This seems like the height of interference. It's gratuitous.
Republicans making hay out of the gratuitous age comments in the report.
This is a little bit, in my view, beyond editorializing. It is gratuitous political hackery.
All of the other language, we use the word extraneous, we use the word gratuitous, but like I said, I think those are generous words. Those are just actually too nice to say. They were not supposed to be there.
Oh, Newsbusters, they're the best at Media Research Center. I think my favorite one of all is Michael Steele. Michael Steele, the former chairman of the Republican National Committee, now a talking head for MSNBC, who I think he's just been broken by the whole Trump thing. Him calling this gratuitous political hackery. I mean, political hackery, Michael Steele? Really? Is that you saying that? Do you think any of this is a coincidence? Do you think any of this just said, oh, hey, everyone's saying gratuitous all at once? Is that's a weird coincidence, isn't it? Hey, there's all these reports about how foul-mouthed and aggressive Joe Biden is as he's yelling at his staff behind the scenes. That seems weird because those stories go along with Susan Rice saying, and I'll say it once again, especially for Matthew in the Rumble chat, Susan Rice calling Health and Human Services Secretary Becerra a bitch ass. All these stories coming together all at the same time that shows, well, partly chaos behind the scenes at the Biden administration, but really shows a different picture of a man in command. Very different than what you heard from Robert Hur. Yeah, I want to paraphrase what Jon Stewart said the other day on The Daily Show, because we keep getting these stories about Joe Biden and about how he's really on top of his game and he knows everything that you need to know and he's really laying into his staff behind the scenes. Maybe you should just turn on your camera from your smartphone when these moments happen. I know you're probably sitting in a skiff or something, but I don't know. Maybe you should let the American people see that Joe Biden instead of just reporting behind the scenes about it. Because right now, the only video of Joe Biden we see reminds us of Tim Conway in those sketches on the old Carol Burnett show. He looks like he's about 108 years old. But an old 108. And his brain, it doesn't work so much. I think he's got mashed potatoes for brains. Oh, and speaking of brains that don't work too much, another Democrat, this one, Representative Barbara Lee in California. Now, she's a Marxist, and she has a great proposal for our country. She's running for Senate in California. And let me just tell you something. Of the 3 Democrats that are running for Senate in California, she's the worst of the lot, but it's close because right now, if a Democrat wins this race in California for senator, you're going to get either this communist maniac, Barbara Lee, or you're going to get insane, ridiculous anger management problem, Katie Porter, or you're going to get lying, deceitful, pencil-necked Adam Shifty Schiff. Those are the choices for Democrats right now. And thank God, LA Dodgers Major League Baseball Hall of Famer Steve Garvey is running for the Republicans, and he's looking pretty good for a novice in the political game. So we'll see what happens. Right now, it looks like it's going to be Adam Schiff versus Steve Garvey. But let's take a quick look at communist Barbara Lee, who's pushing now for a $50 minimum wage. Can I say that again? Because I want to make sure you heard me correctly. I'm not saying $15. No. 50. 50. 5 tens. $50. She wants a $50 minimum wage. Watch now the brilliance of Democrat economic philosophy.
You're calling for a $50 an hour federal minimum wage. That's 7 times the current national minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. Can you explain how that would be economically sustainable for small businesses? You have 60 seconds.
First, let me say I owned and ran a small business for 11 years. I created hundreds of jobs, benefits, retirement benefits, also healthcare benefits. I know what worker productivity means, and that means that you have to make sure that your employees are taken care of and have a living wage. In the Bay Area, I believe it was the United Way, came out with a report that very recently, $127,000 for a family of four is just barely enough to get by. Another survey very recently, $104,000 for a family of one, barely enough to get by. Low income because of the affordability crisis. And so just do the math. Just do the math. Of course, we have national minimum wages that we need to raise to a living wage. You're talking about $20, $25, fine. But I have got to be focused on what California needs and what the affordability factor is when we calculate this wage.
So I'm sorry, Congresswoman. The question was, how in the hell does this make any sense? And how are you going to make this work? She sort of avoided that question, didn't she? She is right, though. I mean, it is absolutely impossible to live in the Bay Area in California. It's possible to live in most places in California. Inflation is absolutely sky high. Things cost too much. And by the way, with the highest taxes, literally the highest taxes in the country, you're also getting no law enforcement, nobody going to jail. You've got people urinating and defecating and in some cases fornicating on the streets due to their criminal vagrant homeless crisis. You've got people doing drugs on the streets. You've got people going into the stores and clearing the shelves and shoplifting with garbage bags full of goods, and no one's doing anything and no one's getting arrested. And if they do get arrested, no one's pressing charges. And if they do press charges, no one's going to jail. It is completely unlivable, but the problem isn't that there is a high enough minimum wage. The problem is, well, I don't know. Let me walk you through this, Representative Lee. The Bay Area, you say? I'm sorry. Who's the dominant party running the Bay Area for the last 50 years? That would be the Democrats, wouldn't it? In the County Council of San Francisco, county supervisors, and the mayor of San Francisco. And you're a congresswoman from there. What party do you belong to? Oh, that would be the Democrats as well. And by the way, what party is dominating the state legislature in Sacramento there? That would be the Democrats as well. And what party has been the governor of California for the last 20 plus years? That would be your party, the Democrats. At any point here, do you think maybe the problem is you? Maybe the call is coming from inside the house? No. The real problem here is the companies aren't paying their employees $50 an hour. By the way, I mean, no offense to the moderator there from KTLA Channel 5 in Los Angeles, but you might have also asked the good Congresswoman what a $50 an hour minimum wage at McDonald's would do to the price of a quarter pounder. I'm just saying. You might have asked it that way. But I got to tell you, after hearing that answer from Barbara Lee, I'm starting to change my mind about economics and the viability of a minimum wage. And I got to tell you something. I think Barbara Lee, Representative Barbara Lee of the Bay Area of California running for Senate, is a tool. She is a capitalist tool for the corporate pigs that are keeping American workers down. How dare she? $50? I am right now stating for the record, and I want everyone to hear this, I think we should have a $500 an hour minimum wage. Now you're talking. Now that's going to fix the problem. $50? You can't live on that. Give me a break. No. We need to have a $500 minimum wage. All the economists agree. Every brilliant economist out there will tell you that when you raise the minimum wage as high as you possibly can, and then even higher, that helps everybody involved. Look at this guy, Thomas Sowell. I'm sure he agrees with me.
I was so lucky. I at the time I had no clue about all this. I left home in 1948. Many decades later, I learned that the unemployment rate among black teenagers in 1948, 16, 17-year-olds, was 9.4%. Among whites, so same age, it was 10.2%. So both blacks and white teenagers had only a fraction of the unemployment that they have today.
You were expected to work. You were expected to be able to get a job.
And more importantly, the jobs were there for you. And this is because of a fluke, really. The minimum wage law in the United States, Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, was passed with specified rates of pay that you're supposed to get. Almost immediately, inflation took off during the 1940s. So by 1948, those numbers that were in the law were meaningless.
Oh, I see.
In other words, when I started out as a Western Union messenger, the minimum wage was 40 cents an hour. I started out at the bottom at 65 cents an hour. So it was the same as if there was no minimum wage. And this is what happened. You had this, and I was so lucky. I, of course, had no clue about any of this. Now a black kid 20 years later comes in there. People have become compassionate. They've raised the minimum wage, so he can't get a job.
Got it.
And I don't think it does any community any good to have a whole lot of teenage males hanging around on the streets with no job and nothing to do.
Well, I mean, I guess maybe, but we're talking about the Bay Area, San Francisco. I mean, I'm sure nothing can go wrong there when you've got a whole lot of young people and teenagers hanging around on the streets without a job with nothing to do. But hold on, he can't. Now, this Thomas Sowell, this is just a one-off, right? He doesn't really know what he's talking about. Everybody knows that the only way to increase employment in the black community is to increase the minimum wage. So Thomas Sowell has got to have that wrong, right? Because it just makes sense. You see, racist employers want to pay these black employees the smallest amount of money possible. And the only way they will pay a fair living wage is for the government to force the minimum wage to go higher and higher and higher. And that will help the black community, right? Everybody knows that. Democrats have been telling me that for years. So let's get a different opinion. We'll get a second opinion. And this guy, he's black. Walter Williams. Let's hear him explain it to us.
In 1972, white construction workers, unskilled construction workers, were making $1.91 an hour. And firms are hiring black construction workers to do the same job for 39 cents an hour. So what was the incentive of contractors? It was hire black workers because they were cheaper. And so the unions figured, well, if they can make black workers just as expensive as white workers, they would improve their bargaining position. So the minimum wage law has two dramatic effects so far as human beings are concerned. It discriminates against low-skilled employment, and it lowers the cost of discrimination. That is, whenever you deny people the right to lower the price for what they sell or raise the price for what they buy, you make the less preferred person worse off. Let me give you another example, just a really quick example. Suppose you saw a fat, old, ugly, cigar-smoking man married to a beautiful young lady. What kind of prediction would you make about that man's income? You guess it's pretty high. What is he doing? He's telling the beautiful young lady, look, I can't compete for your hand on the basis of a guy like Williams. So I'm gonna, so he says, I'm going to offset my handicap by offering you higher prices. Now, some of you would say, well, is it fair for beautiful young ladies to treat fat, old, ugly, cigar-smoking men differently than handsome men? And you say, no, we're going to make a law. And you make a law that beautiful women had to treat fat, old, ugly, cigar-smoking men just like they treat handsome men. Then, after you make a law such that, what happens to the probability of a fat, old, ugly, cigar-smoking man marrying a beautiful young lady? It goes to zilch, because you've taken away his most effective means of competing with the more preferred person. It's the same thing setting minimum prices. You deny less preferred people the most effective tool for competing with more preferred people. That is, Just look at filet mignon and chuck steak. How does chuck steak compete with filet mignon? It goes for a lower price. And if you had an equal steak law, then people would buy all filet mignon and chuck steak would sit on the shelves.
Maybe I was wrong about that whole $500 an hour minimum wage thing. Now that I think about it, and now that I've actually educated myself, something clearly Representative Barbara Lee and most of the Democrats in this country, especially in leadership, refuse to do. Now that I've actually learned something from great intellectual minds like Thomas Sowell and the late, great Walter Williams, now I've realized something. Barbara Lee, by proposing a $50 minimum wage, is an economic moron. And even better, because as we've just learned, the minimum wage actually drives unemployment in the Black community higher. History shows us, and as it just got explained to you beautifully, not only is Representative Barbara Lee of California running for Senate an economic moron, but she's also a racist. That's it for today's show. Thank you so much for watching, especially everyone watching live right now on Rumble. Please like and subscribe our channel and recommend it and leave comments and all that jazz. And we'll be back next time. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Oh, and check out the podcast. The audio of this is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like your podcasts. And all of these segments will be broken out later today and distributed on your favorite video platform so you can share them if you want. We'd appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry.